Okay, episode 14. We're back. This is the 2023 Outlook episode, and we actually have video for this one. So this will be the first ever video podcast that we do, and it's in person, which is pretty cool.
And this is also our 20th take, just about. We have the dual microphones now, upgraded the microphone. We also have the video for the first time rolling over there on James's iPhone. Seems to be relatively decent quality. And yeah, this is the 2023 goals, outlook, kind of systems podcast. So we're going to cover a bunch of different things in this podcast. It's not going to be as focused on one topic, not as much research going into it, but more so effort on both of our parts, trying to set different goals and different systems that we'll use to keep each other accountable for those goals. And also, a lot of it has been challenging each other on why we're setting certain goals and things like that. So hope to kind of elucidate our thought process during this episode, and then also fill you guys in on some of the goals that we're setting, just for an added layer of accountability as well.
Yeah, maybe we can even for this episode include, like, in the show notes, some of the templates we've been using, like the Excel template and some other just ideas we have around holding ourselves accountable. So I guess a good place to start would be our background today, which is my bookshelf, which Drew asked me how many of these books have I actually read, and the answer is about 2/3 from front to back. And then there's a few really that I haven't, I flipped around and maybe I've read part of, and then a couple that I haven't touched at all. So that's a good place to start, I think, because we both have some pretty specific reading goals.
And then also you've read a decent amount of books also on your Kindle, right? So of the ones on your Kindle, is it still about 2/3 there, or are those ones a little bit lower in terms of reading all the way through?
Yeah, it's even more so on my Kindle because it's so easy to get books on the Kindle. Like I use this app called Libby, which connects to your library card, and then you can easily take out ebooks on your iPhone or your Android, and then it connects to your Kindle account. And what you can actually do is you can send the books to Kindle, and that works really well. So I'll take out like a few books at a time and pop open all of them, and then whichever ones I want to stick with, I'll keep reading.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you get the kind of guilt when you don't finish books at this point, or not anymore? Because I know when I don't finish a book, I kind of have this guilt where I'm like, well, I spent $20 on this book. I don't have the Libby app, but I spent $20 on this book, $30, and I only read 2/3 of it, or I only read half of it, or I jumped around from different sections. Do you feel guilty about that, or is that something that you kind of come out on the other side of?
No, I don't feel guilty at all about it. I guess maybe one thing that various people have said this. I think like Naval was the first guy to say it, but that like number of books read is the ultimate vanity metric for adults. Like, oh, I read 100 books this year. Like, great. What did you take out of that, if anything? Which kind of leads into one of my goals for this year, which is to actually read less books and to spend more time with each book that I read. So my plan is for that, it's going to be one book a month. And I'm taking the total page count and then dividing it by, I've settled on like 14 days. And then I will just have a number of pages to read each day, take notes, make highlights, things like that. And then I'll use the rest of the month to go through the book again, review it, break down what I want to take away from it, and then use that, kind of maybe codify it in some way. It'll probably end up being podcast topics or going to show notes. I'll probably also just maybe post it elsewhere. So that's my plan. I thought of this given just the amount of books that I read, and I was thinking I maybe take 1% of things from 99, from all the books I read. So this is just a way to get kind of higher ROI from reading.
And walk me through that a little bit more. I mean, I guess you explained a little bit, but most people are trying to read more books. So are there any other ways that you're going to try to apply the things that you read a little bit more? Is there a system or habit around it that will help you to ensure that you're applying it? Instead of, hey, I'm reading, half the amount of books or a quarter of the amount of books, but now I'm just still applying that 1%. Is there any way to make sure that you're going to apply more of that?
Yeah, so there's ways to make it easier. I read mostly on ebooks because it's the most efficient. So like I have a system where I use this app called Obsidian for taking notes, and it has a plugin that goes directly to your Kindle account. So it'll actually sync all of your Kindle highlights directly to the note taking app. And then, so I'll do that. And then what I'll do below the notes is like, I'll kind of just go through and then in my own words, write out like what I kind of learned for like different pieces of it. Part of that is also like focusing on only taking like the highest signal highlights from a book. Cause if you have 100 highlights from a book, it makes it very difficult. And it kind of makes, there's probably not 100 important things. There's probably like 9 or 10 like right. Big key points in any book. That, your typical book that's like 300, 400 pages. So trying to be more selective with the highlights is one way to do it. And then to have a system where you have the highlights easily available to you and then to expound upon them in your own words. And then from there, I'm kind of thinking maybe I'll, I don't know. I was kind of thinking maybe they'll become like other kind of habits or goals for me throughout the year, like apply this in this way or, stick to doing, this thing you learned from this book for, X amount of days and just see what happens. That's kind of the impetus for it. I'm like, more so I just want to see like what happens if you actually apply stuff from books. Like the first book I'm doing it with, I have here the 4-Hour Work Week, and this like Tim Ferriss, it's his breakout book, first book he wrote. And the whole thing is just about different, productivity systems and separating your time from your income and just kind of lifestyle design and things like this. And Tim Ferriss, I don't think of as like a hacky guy. So when he says things in the book, like, do this, and it's very likely that like X outcome will happen. He's built up enough credibility to this point where I believe him. And so I kind of want to see, like, can he like, what happens if you actually do apply, like, for lack of a better word, like religiously what you read in these books? Because most of us don't. Like I truly don't, or haven't up to this point. So that's kind of giving me my big experiment for 2023.
I think the other thing too is that you have so many different types of books, right? You have some on statistics, some are on religion and philosophy. It's hard to know exactly how you're going to apply those because the books are such a wide range of topics. It's tough to say, oh, I'm going to do this one thing in order to apply everything. It's probably going to depend based upon what the theme of the book is, right?
Yeah, and it's also about like, what do I want to get out of it? Like, I can just look at some of the books here I have is like Hacking Darwin up here is all about the future of genetic engineering and how it's going to change humanity. I'm probably not going to read that or anything like that in 2023 because it's just not a good chance there's nothing applicable for it in my life. I'm going to try to stick to things that are very practical, like a lot of stuff that gets talked about in 4-Hour Work Week. I have 4-Hour Chef right here, which has a lot of good tips and tricks on like learning new skills and things like that. I'm trying to think of just from up here, if there's anything else. There's some like maybe mindfulness books up here. Maybe I'll reread and try to take some lessons from. But other than that, it's going to be sticking to some like really high signal, very practical books. Great mental models right here. Maybe that's something worth revisiting. So we'll see.
Yeah, I could see a world where you spend a month doing the mental models book and really dive into each one, maybe do some research into how they've been used in the past, and then writing out how to actually use the model in your life. I remember one of our earlier conversations on the podcast was that mental models were in the description of the podcast, but they've been kind of created into this strategy porn, as we called it before. where they're definitely really interesting, and then it's a good lens to use in order to look at different situations and problems. But if there's no application, it's like you just have a garage full of rusty tools, right? If you're not actually using the tools, they're just going to gather rust and take up space. So I think really trying to use these mental models and then just more of the things in the books that we read is definitely important. I know I'm reading uh, the new David Goggins book. It's never finished. And uh, David Goggins, I've said to somebody else recently, it's really just like motivational crack. It's it's just like a straight dose of inspirational crack cocaine. But I think it's sometimes entertaining. But he has a lot of different exercises in the book, and I'm somebody that will read most of a book, and if there's exercises in it, I almost never will do the exercises that they tell you to do. And I think a lot of people are in this camp with me as well. But it's really why you're reading the book is to actually apply it to your life. And the author has said, hey, I'm writing all of this context so that you can get to the application portion. Then we just gloss over it and think that we're going to go back and apply it later. But it's pretty rare that we do it. So I think that's a really good goal to dive into these books in a different way and think more about the application point of view.
Yeah, and real quick before we get into your reading goals, I think, yeah, I haven't read David Goggins' new book, but I read Can't Hurt Me, his first book. And yeah, I read it. It was a great read. His story is really engaging and amazing. But I'm reading it on my couch like before bed, and I'm just flipping through the exercises, and I didn't apply a single one. I mean, maybe that's like a credit to him in kind of a way where like his story is so engaging that you just want to keep reading it. But I think I'm more so trying to this year take the approach of like treating these books more like textbooks and practical guides rather than just reading material. So with that being said, let's jump into the reading goals that you have for this year.
Yeah, so I set the bar a little bit lower this year. I don't really focus on the outcome goals as much. So I set a goal of reading 10 books this year. And like you, I want to read books that are a little bit more applicable, mostly centering around exercise, nutrition, and psychology. After a relatively long academic career, there was a good amount of time, I would say, in the past year where I was burnt out on looking into those topics. And I've had a little bit more motivation to look into them recently and dive into the exercise and nutrition, especially. So I'll spend a lot of time there in the upcoming year. But I'm going to be spending 15 minutes, I believe, 6 times a week is the goal. Just doing reading. And so I'll do 15 minutes 6 times a week, and that will be part of a nightly routine. I'm hoping to use that in order to set the tone for an earlier bedtime. So that was a big issue for me in this past year and years past, where I just will delay going to bed. I'll be on my phone, and next thing you know, I'm thinking about, oh, I have 9 hours until I need to be ready to go out the door for work. So now I'm at less than 8 hours of sleep, and now I'm at 7, and you just kind of are on the phone, just flipping through it, and you can't stop. So one of the goals is just to create a nightly routine where I'm going to journal, just quick, like 3 minutes, using the Daily Stoic Journal, and then also read for 15 minutes. And I'm hoping that will set the tone, along with an 8-hour sleep goal, 5 times a week, of trying to tighten that aspect of my life up a little bit more and make sure that I read.
Yeah, I think it's good to tie the reading into the nighttime and sleep routine. Reading doesn't necessarily tie into my nighttime routine, but I don't really even have one. But my one rule for this year is I'm going to try to be no screens by 10 p.m., which I'm pretty good at, but I can still get caught up in like looking at my phone, past 10 p.m. and then Um, it keeps me up. Kind of part of that goal is this year I have a goal to actually listen to less podcasts. So, as Drew knows, I'm addicted to podcasts. I just have them on in the background 24/7. It's not always things that are uh, educational or really beneficial in the knowledge department. It's more when I just want background noise on it, maybe it's like an entertainment or like kind of like comedy or like news or something. And pretty much every night I'll go to bed listening to one of these podcasts, which I don't think is a bad thing to do. But I think maybe if I'm going to, I'm limiting myself to, I believe I have a limit of 3 hours per week of, no, I have a limit, maximum of 5 hours per week I'm setting for myself for podcasts. I got my Spotify Wrap back. I listened to 45,000 plus minutes of podcasts in 2022. 75,000 plus minutes of music. Yeah. But yeah, max 5 hours per week in 2023. And then I'm making 2 hours must be educational. So that's like at least one podcast episode. And then overall, I'm just trying to have a bit of a lower information diet in 2023 and focus more on, again, applying what I learned from these things.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about the whole low information diet aspect as well, because I saw that thread within a lot of what you were saying. You've been reading a decent amount of Tim Ferriss lately, and that's something that he proposes a lot. So my question to you is, what are kind of the benefits, aside from applying more of what you read, what is the benefit of a low information diet, at least how you see it or how Tim Ferriss sees it?
Yeah, I actually just got up to that part in 4 Hour Work Week. I started reading the book a little early. I've also kind of like flipped through it in the past, so I'm just kind of running through it. But one thing I actually heard recently, yesterday, actually, I was listening to the Made You Think podcast, which is hosted by Nat Eliason, and I can't remember the two other host names. I'll put it in the show notes. But it was my first time listening to it in a long time yesterday. And they were talking about the book, The Comfort Crisis. And they were talking about how in that book, Michael Easter, he wrote The Comfort Crisis, talks about how we have a modern people, we have a poverty of boredom now. So like the idea is like, there's a reason we get bored, and it's not a bad thing. There's a lot of like creative thought that comes out of boredom and innovative thought, but we've taken boredom away from ourselves now. Like boredom isn't, we can just shut boredom off by just looking at our phone now, or mindlessly scrolling, or even, TV, or just picking up a book. Like we have everything around us all the time. And kind of the argument is like boredom is really valuable. You should let your mind really shut off and go into that boredom mode more often, because it'll start kind of in the background piecing thoughts together. And that's where a lot of people have a lot of great ideas, and we kind of rob ourselves of that. And so the low information diet plays into that, in that you're just not stimulating your brain with all this information that has to process, even if it feels like you're not really taking anything in, like scrolling Twitter or scrolling Reddit or just like lightly reading a book. It's like, I think like your brain is still doing a lot more work to get through that than you feel on a conscious level. So that's one of the benefits of a low information diet is I guess bring more boredom into your life and maybe more creative thought. And then another benefit of a low information diet is you just don't need to know most things. Like truly, you don't need to know most things, especially news. Like Tim Ferriss doesn't like consume any news. I don't think he said. He actually talks about how he makes a decision to vote. I don't know if he still does it this way, but leading up to the election, on like the day before election day or something like that, or the week before, I think he says he will just email like 10 of his, he believes like 10 of his smartest friends, see what their opinions are, kind of crowdsource opinions, and then just watch a couple debates. And that's how he makes his decision. So he lets other people be a filter for information for him, who he trusts. So that's because it's like, yeah, the amount of time it would actually take for you to, consume all that information. And again, most of it is just kind of useless. So those are kind of two quick benefits of it.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I definitely feel that with how your brain is still kind of chewing on a lot of this content in the background. And I think it's why going out and going for a walk or going outside and just being away from the phone just becomes so relieving. I feel like it's time to actually chew on that buildup of all this content. I almost feel that when I'm going for a walk, it's like you're just emptying out all of this like built up sludge that you take in content wise. But we've all heard it in terms of using technology at this point and social media. It's almost gotten to a point where uh, I'm kind of overhearing how bad social media is, how the algorithm and how addictive it is. I'm more so focused on how do we actually move forward and engage with these tools that we need to have in our life at this point. And I think that sharing what we've done in terms of the screen time limits could be interesting for people. And then we'll get back to the habits. What we've been doing is we actually, James and I, have parental controls on each other's phone. And what that actually looks like is I have a password set on his phone. He set all of these different limits of apps that he typically engages with a lot, or maybe too much, you could say. And with that, you can set these app limits, and compared to just setting screen time limits on your own without a password, you can't just blow through the warnings. So if you don't have a password, you can just say, give me 15 more minutes when it comes up. It says, hey, you hit your screen time limit. 15 more minutes. Ignore limit for the day. 1 more minute, whatever it is. But what this actually does is it completely locks you out of the apps that you select. And I've noticed this to be a huge benefit for me, especially because you can set certain downtimes. And between, I believe, 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., I'm not able to use any apps except some critical apps that I've selected to be able to use at any time. For example, messages, phone, maybe an airport app in case I have a early flight and, I can't get my boarding pass, things like that, just critical functions, or if anyone needs to reach me in an emergency. But that has been absolutely huge for me because discipline is definitely a limited capacity resource, and it's tough when you're tired at the end of the day to get off that phone and quit scrolling. So I think that would be a solid thing for other people to maybe give a try in the new year, is get a buddy that, is, I guess, growth minded or interested in something like this, and set a screen time password and hold each other accountable with it that way.
Yeah, and as a reminder to both of us, we both need to reset passwords, actually. So we've both actually
Yes.
divulged each other's passwords for one reason or the other. So we should, after the podcast, go back and do that again. But yeah, no, it's so true. It's like the screen time thing it's a great like concept if you're going to like set it up for yourself. Like it's cool that, Apple has that and they're, trying to help you be mindful of it. But yeah, you can just blow through it you can approve for all day or approve for 15 more minutes. It's just not enough friction, really. For me, for some people it may be, but for me personally, it's just not enough friction to stop me. And you're right, like discipline, willpower, these are limited resources. I can't remember where I've heard this, but I believe there's been studies done where they take people and they take like one group and they have them do, like nothing for 15 minutes and then present them with like the choice of, a healthy option or like a junk food option. And they take a different group and they make them do like all these mental tasks and kind of jump through all these hoops and then present them with it. And I think the group that had to do like little quizzes and puzzles ends up picking the junk food because like they're to make that the willpower focused choice of like, avoiding the food you want to avoid or going to the gym or doing this. It like does take a mental energy to do, and you can only make so many of those decisions in the day. So what you really have to do is make your environment work for you. And that's what like we do with the phones. The passwords and our lack of ability to overcome them to the limits is just a forcing function to bring our willpower towards other things. It doesn't let us expend it on the apps. We don't have a choice. So willpower is less about trying to strengthen it, if you can do that, or selectively use it, but more so about just like putting buffers all around you to say like, okay, I can only really focus my attention here because I don't have any other choices. So that's just kind of a piece of advice.
And then also, as you mentioned before, in a different context, the content is running in the background. I also think that some of these urges, even if they're not floating up to your conscious mind, are running in the background. We know that even if you have a phone on the table, right side up where the screen is up versus down versus in your pocket, that has completely different effects on how attentive you are to the conversation that you're having. For example, if I had my messages up on my laptop versus it's closed, in the back of my brain, my brain still knows, hey, I could be sending a message right now while James is talking about smartphone usage, and that's always running in the background. So once you just completely wall that off for yourself where, hey, I don't have any more time on Instagram for the day, that urge just can't even really come up. So you're not fighting with that and trying to white knuckle the discipline. But I think that's a really good thing for people to try or at least consider. And just getting back to the habits, we both have exercise habits. Do you want to go into your habit and maybe even some outcome goals, if you have any, for 2023?
Yeah, totally. So my health goals are kind of maintenance goals, I'd say. I don't really have a problem going to the gym or working out or anything like that. I don't have any nutrition goals, but I do want to commit to lifting weights 5 times per week. That's something I kind of, over the last year, have probably fallen off on. Maybe I'll only do 2 or 3 times per week. And maybe I'll do it more intensely, but I think would like to get myself into the gym 5 times a week. And part of that is also going to be, I've never used a plan, a workout plan. And I want to use one of those this year to really, really just track how I'm performing and things. I don't track my personal records or anything like that. I don't have a plan really. Anytime I go into the gym, I'll squat. I want to have, squatted this much by the time I leave or bench this much. So this year I kind of want to try to do that, just to kind of monitor my own progress there. I also just know I feel better when I'm lifting weights more consistently. So that's something I want to do. And then I actually have here run 6 to 10 miles per week. That's kind of what I've already been doing. And I had this kind of rule to maintain of this question that I asked myself is, can I run a half marathon right now with ease? The answer should always be yes. So no stopping. So I think that's a good goal. I do have reservations about this now, and I kind of want to change up how I do my cardio because I don't know how good of an idea it is long term to be putting in that many miles a week on pavement all the time for my just knees and stuff. So I think I will also supplement this with rucking this year. So I got my mom a rucksack for Christmas from Go Ruck. We're not sponsored by them or anything, but that would be cool. But what a rucksack is, it's actually used, I think, primarily in the military, and it's just a backpack. Looks just like a backpack, but inside of it, it has these weight slots, and you add these plates. They're kind of like square rectangle plates, and you can get different pound levels. I got my mom 20-pound one, and I walked around with it a little bit. I did a 1.5 mile walk, and it's a really good workout. It's definitely less stress on your joints and your knees, but it's kind of resistance training while also getting a lot of good cardio in. So I think I'm going to give that a shot this year and get there because I go on a lot of walks. So that could be a great way to get more cardio and exercise in.
Just curious, how high was your heart rate during the walk with the rucksack? Do you remember what kind of range it was in? Was your heart beating quickly, or how much were you kind of exerting yourself?
I would have to look. I know that my walking heart rate from just taking a lot of walks with the Apple Watch is I think like 102 or something like that. So I'd have to look and compare. I can probably check it on the app later, but I would assume it's maybe higher with the rucksack. I don't know. That would be a good thing to test and monitor.
Gotcha. Yeah. The reason I ask is I was just trying to figure out if it's could be something that could even preserve your aerobic ability if you wanted to continue building up that capacity. If you decide to start running more miles in the future, which I'm sure it could help you preserve some degree of aerobic ability. But yeah, some of my goals for the 2023 are centered around exercise as well. I tried to keep it a little bit more general. I'm not going to set specific times per week that I'm going to lift versus run, because I have a few outcome goals, which are to deadlift, I think 585 at the end of the year. I said 5-minute mile, but I'm thinking maybe more like 5:30, 5:15. And then also I'd like to be able to bench press 315 for 5. And the reason I'm affording a little bit of flexibility with the breakdown of lifting versus running and maybe even yoga is because I might hit some of those goals a little bit earlier than others, and it'll just give me a little bit more flexibility in order to periodize the program that I create for myself. Maybe sometimes I need to run 4 times a week in order to get the running goal versus maybe 4 times a week of lifting sometimes to get the strength goals. I did a baseline this week, and I got 295 on bench for 3. I got 475 on deadlift for 1. And then on the mile, I ran it when it was extremely cold out. It was around 20 degrees and I was freezing. I got a 607. So that's reasonably far off from the goal of, I'll say 515. So that's going to take a lot of work. And I anticipate that I'll be doing a lot more VO2 max training. And I guess to take a step back, why am I doing this, right? I'm 26 years old. I'm not an athlete anymore. Why have these strength and aerobic goals beyond, just recreationally exercising? I think the biggest thing is I listened to a Peter Attia podcast lately or recently, and he was talking about the hazard ratios for longevity. And I believe the 2 biggest protective factors.
Can you explain what a hazard ratio is first?
I don't think I can explain a hazard ratio, but essentially it's just a way of understanding either the hazard or the protection gained from a lifestyle choice. I don't know the exact, way to explain it mathematically.
I mean, I think you kind of hit it there. Yeah, it's just I think it's like it's measured on a scale of like 1, so it's like hazard ratio of, I'm gonna bastardize it. I'm not sure honestly. Maybe I'll look this up while you keep going, and then I'll break.
Yeah, if I were to guess, I think it's 1 is 100%. So I believe it might be that if exercising and having a high amount of muscle mass was 1, it protects you 100% more in terms of all-cause mortality compared to other individuals. I'm not too sure. Like if it was 2, it might be 2 times more protection against heart disease or mortality or something like that. But that's all to say that the 2 biggest protective factors against all-cause mortality were VO2 max, so the maximal amount that your cardiorespiratory system can uptake in terms of oxygen, so cardiorespiratory fitness, we could say, and then also the amount of strength that you have, which is a huge indicator because a lot of times there's sarcopenia, there's loss of muscle mass as we age. So having a high amount of peak muscle mass will provide a gentler decline as you age in terms of muscle mass. And why that relates to longevity makes a lot of sense because, if you're wasting away, you're going to be more likely to fracture a hip, which 50% mortality rate there. And then also, if you're going to fall on any bone, if you have higher amount of strength, you can catch yourself just with your balance, or also forearm strength, you'd be able to maybe catch yourself and hold onto a railing, a counter, or a piece of furniture before you fall. So not that I'm at that stage of life yet, but that's just something that I'm keeping in mind now that my athletic career is done. And also at the end of the day, I'm in the field. So I'd like to still have some type of goals within nutrition and exercise, which will just push me to understand the mechanisms and content within exercise a little bit more.
Yeah, so real quick, I have the definition up. So hazard ratio is the ratio of the hazard rates corresponding to the conditions characterized by two distinct levels of a treatment variable of interest. For example, in a clinical study of a drug, the treated population may die at twice the rate per unit time of the control population. The hazard ratio would be 2, indicating higher hazard of death from the treatment, which is what you would not want to see if you were trying to test a drug and have it have beneficial effects. But yeah, so it's kind of on that scale of 1, and then anything under 1 is protection. Above 1 is increased risk of hazard or of some negative outcome. But I also think what's important to note of what you said is like these goals, like you're not at that stage of life yet where you have to worry about this as much. But I think I've heard Peter Attia say this, and it checks out too. It's just like kind of basic physiology is like, what is it? By age 30, 35 for men and women about is when muscle mass starts decreasing by 1% a year. You can protect against that obviously by continuing to resistance train like well into probably your 60s and 70s. But I think the more muscle mass you have going into early middle age, the easier it is to maintain. It's easier to maintain a high level of muscle mass than it is to at like 55 be like, all right, I'm going to put on now muscle to protect me in old age. It's going to be much harder, and it's going to be much easier to protect the muscle that you have from when you were 25 compared to just starting from 0 and putting muscle on at 55 in hopes of, increasing your longevity. So that's another reason for people to take an interest in it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And the other one that's important, especially for the female population, is peak bone mass. So if you have a low peak bone mass, that will predispose you to osteoporosis down the line, especially postmenopausal. So resistance training is going to help with that peak muscle mass, but also applying that load to your skeleton, holding weight and holding it on your back, holding it in your hands, will help to reinforce that bone structure as well, help you build more density in the bones and stave off some of that osteoporosis as well. So that's another benefit.
Yeah, totally. So we've covered kind of knowledge, reading goals, we've covered health goals. Maybe we want to take a quick detour and just talk about how we're actually going to hold each other accountable to this. And then maybe after that, we can go into some of maybe the podcast goals or things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, one habit that I actually want to cover a little bit more because I think it could be interesting for people is I have a goal of improving public speaking this year. The podcast is helping me to do that already, but I stumbled upon an app recently that I think that the audience could find relatively useful, and that's called Speako. It's Speeko. And if you compare it to anything, it takes the form of Toastmasters, which is a group that's centered around public speaking. It's been around for probably over 50 years. And it's a course, And one of the exercises that they have you do in Toastmasters is it's a 1 to 2 minute random prompt, and you have 10 seconds to think about it, and then you just need to riff. And they're going to measure you based upon your intonation. Are you monotone? Are you enunciating your words? Are you using a lot of filler words like so, as, um, for example, is a filler word. And the reason that I like Speako is because you can record yourself for 2 minutes, and then it uses artificial intelligence to give you essentially a score on all of these different parameters. And it gives you live feedback. You can see a transcript of everything that you said in those 2 minutes. It also gives you a recording so you can listen back to it. And it's already been a very helpful tool for me. And yeah, I'm really excited about using that in the new year to get rid of some of the filler words that clog up speech, and also just be able to have more capacity to have stream of consciousness and go on with valuable information for a long period of time, because that's important when you're in a business setting.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know you sent me Speako before. I hadn't looked into it, but that definitely sounds like something I'd actually like to look into. I didn't realize it was that easy to just speak into it, and then it could record you and give you a transcript and kind of score you. Speako, if you're listening, I feel like I just thought of a great integration with Riverside would actually be Speako. I'm not sure if that's possible. It would be cool if you could record a podcast and listen for filler words you say, because we both try to do that consciously and aren't always successful with it.
Actually, you can do that. So you can start recording on, I could be recording right now. I've done it in Zooms as well. So it has integration on the laptop. You can just download it on a MacBook. And yeah, so you actually can already do that. Great idea. But they've already thought of it. And yeah, you could be in a meeting on Zoom or Teams, and it will even give you live feedback saying, you're using so too much, you're using too much, you're speaking too slowly or too fast, try pausing a little bit more. You don't have to have that showing if that's going to kind of throw you off of your game, but it is available, which I think is amazing as well. Something that we should probably be using for the podcast.
Yeah, next episode, let's do that. I'll have to download it. But okay, cool. So public speaking, now let's take a detour and talk about how we're actually going to hold each other accountable to this, which we have an idea, it might evolve, but we've landed on right now sending each other money when we don't hit our goals or habits. We have a shared habit tracker in Google Sheets, and we'll each just check that each day to make sure. Again, there's a bit of an honor system here, obviously, but we also have some other things in place to keep us honest. For example, we were talking before the podcast about having for workout goals. I record every workout on my Apple Watch, so that just goes on my phone, and me and Drew share the activities app together, so he can just look and see that I've done my weight training workout that day. Same thing with, I have a goal to do at least 1 minute minimum of meditation per day. The meditation app I use syncs up with activities, so Drew can also check that. I'm also going to take screenshots of these things to cover my ass, and then send that, upload it to a Google Drive. So we have ways of keeping ourselves honest and trying to back everything with hard data wherever we can. But Drew, maybe you want to talk a little bit about how we're trying to take advantage of loss aversion to hold ourselves accountable.
Yeah, so we've thought about different ways to harness loss aversion. And for those that don't know what loss aversion is essentially the fact that we are more inclined to avoid a loss than to seek out a gain. So what does that actually mean? If I were to tell you that you're going to gain $5 from doing a certain task, you would be less motivated to seek out the reward of a gain compared to, if you don't do this task, I'm going to take away $5 from you. And what that has looked like in certain health programs where it's been harnessed is insurance companies giving you an Apple Watch for, air quotes, free. And you get a free Apple Watch, but that's as long as you do 3 workouts per week or 2 workouts per week, or maybe go on 3 walks per week. But for every workout less than 3, you have to pay a certain portion of that Apple Watch and pay it back. And that's far better than, we're going to give you a free Apple Watch if you do 3 workouts. Basically, you already have it for free, and then you need to pay, versus it's free if you reach this goal. So the way that we're going to do that is questionable right now. I believe one of the things that we were thinking was taking a week-long trip at the end of the year together, and picking out a really nice place that we both want to go to, great amenities, all of that. We put the money away, and for every month that we don't hit our habits, we take away 1 day off that vacation. So we're starting with 7 days, and now we're at 6 because I messed up this week, or James, or this month, or James messed up. And, there could be a possibility that we have 0 days of the vacation. That's compared to, if we hit 9 out of 12 months where we hit all of our habits, we get to go on a vacation. So the simple difference in framing has widespread effects, and it increased the adherence on average about 2 times compared to seeking out a gain.
Yeah, this actually just made me think of something that I read in 4 Hour Chef, which is Tim Ferriss's book about cooking. But or maybe it was, I don't know, one of his books. But he talks about how he talks about, it was 4 Hour Chef. He talks about learning some skill. I don't remember what it was. Might have been Japanese. Talks about almost speed learning that skill, like taking the most efficient route and trying to like ace a test within 48 hours, and goes about all these ways that he breaks the skill down to be able to do that. What he said that's interesting is we've been conditioned by school to think anything below 90% is failure. It's like, but in this case, if you went from 0% proficiency in Japanese and on the test you got a 60, in the context of school, that's a failure, but that's incredible if in 2 days you went from 0% proficiency in Japanese to 60% proficiency. I mean, that's massive. So I'm almost thinking now with the habits thing, and we haven't talked about this until right now, which is like, maybe we don't set it. Maybe we don't try to hit 100%, like do every single thing every single day, but we turn it into a rate where, both of us have to perform at 85% or better for this year, something like that. I think that could actually be a really good way to go about this.
Yeah, that's actually something that I built into mine. I put mine at a 90% clip. The reason I did that is because I know that there's going to be plenty of weeks where it's just not possible. For example, I know that you went home over Christmas break, and let's say all day you have a family gathering, and then you say, okay, actually I have 6 days a week where I need to work out. And then all of a sudden, oh, well, your parents want to now have another family gathering, and now there's 2 days that you can't work out that week. I think we don't want to become psychotic where now it's, oh, I can't have a family gathering because, something came up that I would rather do. I think building in a little bit more freedom there would definitely make sense. So that's something I didn't share with you yet, but yeah, I would say in the 80-90% range could make a lot of sense. And then even on a weekly amount, building in a little bit of grace as well. Maybe it's not meditating every single day. It's meditating 6 days per week, because on Sundays it's a little bit harder to get to. So I think that's a good theme, building in a little bit of grace just to, reserve the right for some humanity.
Yeah, because I think, I already have trepidation about trying to hit 100% of these things. There's definitely certain ones that I think are much more possible than others. Some of them I haven't really, I don't think, defined well enough to understand if I'm even hitting, which I have to work on. So yeah, I think that's a really good idea, and I'll have to build the rate into my sheet as well. So we'll probably go forward with that, and that'll make it easier for us, just like in the aggregate, because then we don't have to be looking at each other's stuff every single day. We can just take a look at the end of the month and say, like, all right, how'd you do? And it also makes, because really, it's like, what's the point of all this? It's not. I don't want to look back in 5 years and say, oh yeah, in 2023 from April to June, I was really crushing it with all of these things. And then from January to March, and then from July to December, I was just totally off the wagon with all of it. Like, what you really want is to be able to look back in 5 years and say, I built, for 90% of these things, I've been now consistent 80% of the time over a 5-year span. That's much more impressive and impactful than I nailed it for 8 months out of 1 year, and then it just burned me out and I fell off the wagon completely with everything I tried to do.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, the reason we select 4 days per week of meditation or exercise compared to 5 isn't some stringent analysis that we did statistically. There are some principles in thinking about it, but it's not so strategic where, oh, wow, I averaged 4.5 times this year versus 5. I'm such a failure and I didn't get better. A lot of these things are additive, right? I could stop doing the Speako app today and I won't get any better. So even if I hit 3 out of 7 days on average, I'm going to be forking over a lot of money to James, and my bank account's going to be a little bit more drained, but I'll still be a little bit better off compared to if it's 0. Not quite 5, but the difference between 0 and 3 is probably a lot greater than the difference between 3 and 5 times per week.
Yeah, and I think too, we've alluded to this before with talking about working out as a habit, where, like I've talked about and you've talked about, and neither of us have for our lives had these like stringent workout schedules where, we're hitting a certain body part and certain workout regimen 6 days a week for 10 years. No, like we've both just worked out 85% of the time, more or less consistently, like over the last decade. And that's been way more impactful than, trying to nail it over just a finite amount of time. So I think that's a great lens to look at habits and just change through, is you want to just kind of raise your level of proficiency in some area by, some, if you get better at something by just like 30% over a long enough time frame, that's huge. So don't go crazy, people.
Yeah, and also just knowing when it's worthwhile to actually set an outcome goal. It's fine to just set a habit goal of, I want to exercise 3 times per week. If you've failed multiple times with New Year's resolutions because you have this goal of, I'm losing 20 pounds this year, maybe the outcome goal shouldn't be linked to something that's a little bit more out of your control, right? Getting to the gym is a little bit more in your control than losing 20 pounds. Let's say out of nowhere, there's something bad that happens to you where you can't focus on that exercise goal as much. You can't spend 90 minutes in the gym. You can't follow your nutrition program to a T because you're in a new job or you get fired. Just leaving yourself a little bit more grace and not having these super lofty goals could be pretty helpful for people, and not lowering the bar as, okay, we're really taking it easy on ourselves, but giving yourself some grace to just, okay, I'm just going to work out 3 or 4 times per week. I'm not saying how hard I'm going to work out. I'm not going to say what mode of exercise I'm going to do or how long. It just gives you a little bit more flexibility, which I think is huge for people that are just starting to work out. How often are people ultra adherent for 3 weeks with New Year's resolutions where they're getting to the gym 3 times per week or 7 times per week for 3 weeks. And then, oh, now Q1, work starts to ramp up. Oh, I don't make it to the gym for a day. I don't make it for 2 days. And then everything falls apart. So just starting small and lowering the expectations, I think, could be really helpful for a lot of people, especially if, this is your, second, third, fourth time trying to hit a certain habit or goal.
Yeah, and like most of these things only become effective and lasting when they become a state of being and not something that you have to check off on a checklist every day. Like how it matters how you describe yourself. Like I consider myself somebody who goes to the gym. I'm somebody who goes to the gym because I show up to the gym, and that's it really. Like what I do after that is not really how I define myself, but I think of myself as an active person just because I made a habit of at least just showing up to the gym. The quality of the workout that I get in is variable every time, but it's just the fact that I show up. Same thing with reading. Like I consider myself an avid reader, but I'm not somebody who sets out with like, okay, I'm going to read this book front to back, and I have to hit 52 books this year because it's 52 weeks in a year, and blah blah blah, and like get through every single thing and define myself by like the page count. No, I define myself an active reader, avid reader, because I'm somebody who just gets a lot of enjoyment from reading books and having them in my life. It's the act of having them in my life and interacting with them, and not necessarily what that interaction looks like in a defined sense, but more so the fact that they're part of my life. And so it's kind of like making a dish that you have to like let simmer in a pot for a while for like all the flavors to infuse. Like you just got to let it sit, and that's what it becomes much more about. So yeah, it's also like New Year's resolutions aren't helpful because you're thinking about it in just the context of 1 year. It's like you should be thinking about it over at least like a 5 or 10 year period, and like what the outcome could look like then, because that's much more. I think it gives you more motivation too. Like for me, it's always been more motivating. Like what would the end of a decade look like if I just did this consistently versus what would the end of this year or the next 3 months look like? So that's another way to think about it. But maybe we want to jump into now some of the goals that we have for the podcast and the habits we want to get into, and then the outcomes we want from that.
Yeah, I don't know if we've hashed that out completely, but I believe the goal is to still stick to one podcast per week, every week. There's going to be a little bit of an increase in intensity for me at work starting in January and then from March to around October, where things are going to get a little bit more hectic. But as we talked about before, just trying to make it manageable for us will be really big. We hope to bring on more guests during the new year. We had one guest on about a month ago, but we just didn't think it was appropriate to be reaching out to a bunch of people to bring them on as guests during the holiday season. So I think you can expect more guests in the new year. But then I think that the format that we talked about prior would still make sense, where we have a specific episode where I focus on preparing for it, and then James prepares a little bit but asks a little bit more questions. And then we do the opposite, where James prepares for an episode and I take a little bit more of the interviewer role, but still keep it conversational. And then we would have a guest episode in the third week. And then in the fourth week, more of a random episode. And random doesn't mean, that we're not preparing at all, but a little bit more like this episode, where it's not a very, very specific in the weeds technical episode. It's a little bit more maybe what's in the news, what is James getting into, or what am I getting into lately, or what's more top of mind that doesn't warrant a full episode. So that's the format that we're anticipating. We threw around the idea of trying to get 50 active listeners by the end of the year, and I believe that could be a realistic goal. Just trying to keep in mind that we don't set the bar too high where we're burning ourselves out. But any other goals that you would add on?
I mean, I have a personal goal with the podcast to kind of build up our newsletter a bit more with the show notes and just make that a little more formalized and just kind of beef it up a little bit. I think we'll have a pretty good one for this week. We talked about before, one less of a goal or habit, but more of just a task that we want to accomplish is we're going to put together we've already actually put together a Discord for the podcast. So if you're interested, we can include the link to join, or we will include the link to join in the show notes and as well as in the description of the podcast going forward. And that's just a place where we're just kind of going to let it build organically, and it'll just be a place where you can talk to us and we can talk to you. It's just a cool like community to have. And then kind of as topics arise or as interests come up, we'll create channels for certain interests. We've already had the idea of doing a sort of habit Deadpool channel for what Drew and I are doing. Like, you know, if this is something you want to join in on and like you want somebody to hold you accountable to the things you're doing, and there'd be like real consequences for not following through on your habits, it's like this could be a place where you join and you can kind of just join us in this and have like a bit of an accountability group. And, you know, you could see a future of like, we do like a reading group or just things like that, fun things like that. So we have that set up and we will include that in the show notes. And then another thing that we're going to do is we're going to put together a Positive Sum podcast reading list, which will just be a few dozen books recommended by Drew and I on various topics. We will not have that ready for today. I think I want to make that in a way where we kind of have like subjects and like things of like, all right, if you want to learn about this, here's these books, that sort of thing. And I think it'd be really valuable, and we'll just make that a free thing that you can get whenever. So you can kind of see like what maybe books, maybe we'll include podcasts, and there's just things have kind of like colored our thinking. And maybe we'll revise this every year, who knows? But that's another thing that we're going to be doing. So just kind of building more collateral, I guess, around the podcast in the form of the newsletter and the Discord and, you know, more engagement. I know we have plans to, you know, we're thinking of ways to more efficiently and effectively market this and grow the podcast. And we have some ideas around that, maybe some shorter form content coming from us on this. So we have plans, and yeah, I think it'll definitely, we'll reap a lot of benefit from it. So
yeah, that's something I'm really excited about in the new year. The Discord and then some of the other resources that we'll be providing. One of the reasons why the podcast is called Positive Sum is because a lot of the growth or intellectual podcasts that we've listened to, or not a lot, but some of them will be in the direction of being more zero sum. It's giving you content, but it's always in order to sell something. I think one of our goals is to always make sure that it's positive sum, where we're not just building up a audience just to, I guess, take advantage of it financially. We're more so trying to build a community of like-minded people that are looking to explore the same subjects that we are, put out solid content, and really just connect with more intellectuals that want to discuss things in depth. So I think that's one of the things that I look forward to in the new year, bringing on some more guests that are valuable for everyone, and have conversations that are valuable for everyone. And one thing that I'll sort of just add is I want to share the analytics off Anchor real quick, just because we are in our 14th episode. This would be over a fourth of the year, one more episode over a quarter of the year. So our 14th week of doing this. So I thought it would be interesting to just set this as a baseline for 2022, what our listenership was. So in total, we had about 180 plays, which breaks down to an average of about 13, I believe, per episode. And our audience size was around 10. So within 14 weeks, we had audience size of 10 14 plays on average, and I believe our highest episode got about 35 plays. And this was all with pretty minimal marketing, I would say. I would just share it once a week on Instagram. So, with all that being said, I think we're both pretty happy about the start that we've had thus far. And yeah, just looking forward to a little bit more growth in the future, just continuing to improve this step by step.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're both just happy to be ending 2022, having done, after this is up now, 14 of these episodes, which, is like we're very proud of. And especially from when we've had not so many false starts with this, but the first time we tried to do it was, I don't know, two or 3 years ago at this point. And we just went into it with zero plan, and we would have never sustained it. Like we had zero clue what we were doing. We still barely know what we're doing, but we at least there's a structure forming around it. I mean, this is again the most now professional looking version of this that we've ever had. We'll be remote again sooner than later, but point being, we've definitely realized we've come a long way with this, which has been huge. And yeah, I think one goal too is just we'll do at least another 52 episodes of this next year. So it's kind of putting a hard number on something else that we're excited about.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty solid place to wrap, unless you have anything else that you want to cover.
No, you can get the show notes at thepositivesumpod.substack.com. Probably work on also in the new year, maybe getting some custom URLs and some other, other website collateral. I think we're going to put together a LinkedIn profile for this as well. So just kind of getting more stuff around it. So get that. Look out for the reading list that'll come in the new year. We'll put that together. We'll take some time to work on that so it comes out good. And join the Discord. We'll put the link for that in the description. It'll also go out in all the show notes. Again, the show notes are totally free. Just put your email in, subscribe. You'll get them to your inbox every week, and you can look at all the old show notes. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Thank you guys for listening, and excited for what's to come in 2023 for the pod and also for us in the audience. So with all that, thank you. Have a good new year, and we'll see you soon.